Okay, so once again, I embark on yet another video about generic subjective continuity and antinatalism. Specifically, David Benatar's antinatalism, which is based on his asymmetry argument. So this is a response to child-free millennial who just uploaded this video today, um, 8 hours ago. Everything you need to know about antinatalism. I feel the need to um, let her know about uh, generic subjective continuity and how it uh, invalidates David Benatar's asymmetry argument. So I'm just going to go ahead and read my comment here, and I think that should suffice. Unless I have more comments, then I'll add those after I read all of this. Okay. Hi, thanks for making this. I have a lot to say about this topic. I might actually make a video response to yours. First, I find it interesting that some antinatalists are upset that life was imposed on them, yet they would like to impose their ideals onto the animal kingdom. If you don't like life and believe that not existing will equal happiness, peace, eternal nothingness, etc., uh, deprivation, stuff like that, eternal deprivation, then after they die of natural causes and old age, then they can have their wish. But why should they care about what goes on here on Earth and elsewhere in the universe if they believe that death equals resting in peace? So after they're dead, what do they care after? You don't want things imposed on you, so don't impose on others either. Also, we need to ask, if I hadn't been born, would my lack of existing equal an endless perpetual non-experience, endless nothingness, an endless emptiness where there's no sound, sight, thoughts, etc., a sort of experience of no experience, as philosopher Tom Clark put it. And you can learn more about Tom Clark on naturalism.org and read his essay about what I'm going to talk about. His essay is called Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity. It's in the philosophy section. Okay, sure, if the naturalistic atheist worldview is correct and consciousness is a function of the brain, then yes, the dead person's or animal's brain will no longer do consciousness. It will not be one of the brains doing consciousness, but other brains will. So let's think about this some more. What are you? You could say that you are what a brain is doing right now. The sensation of I, self, if this brain, the one reading this sentence right now, was altered enough, then we could actually alter it to the point that you would no longer exist, because this brain would be doing a completely different I, or self, with completely different behaviors, a different personality, and even different memories. But the old self, I, that brain used to do, didn't fall into nothingness, silent black void, eternal oblivion, etc. Instead, there was a gradation from you into a new self, a transformation from one I to a different I. Yet there was a continuous stream of experience. It'd be similar to the stream of experience a person might have if they went to sleep but woke up in the morning with all of their memories gone and they forgot their name and don't recognize themselves in a mirror in the morning. The them that went to sleep is essentially dead, yet there was a continuous stream of conscious experience, even though they don't remember anything past waking up. So now let's take a look at your life. In this thought experiment, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to strip everything down to only the necessary part. Essentially, in a naturalistic worldview, we are all simply brains that are doing consciousness. So a brain was born and it started doing consciousness. This is true for every conscious organism, human and otherwise, there is. Brains are born and then they do consciousness. I say they do consciousness because consciousness is a function of the brain. People like Matt Dillahunty and Sam Harris have used similar language, like the brain does consciousness and so on and so forth. Anyways, now here's a short thought experiment that should convey what will happen after you cease to exist after death, if we do in fact cease to exist at death. Imagine a universe that's completely devoid of all sentient life, so there isn't any consciousness anywhere. There aren't any brains doing consciousness anywhere. But then, through natural processes, a sentient organism eventually comes to exist. So now there's a brain, and it's doing consciousness. The consciousness. I say the consciousness because it's the only consciousness there is, and so therefore it is the consciousness. But now I will reveal to you that this brain is actually doing the conscious experience that is you. So now let's rewind back to the beginning of this thought experiment. Empty universe, devoid of all life, etc. This time, imagine that some other brain was born, and it started doing the consciousness. Would you be in some sort of peaceful oblivion or endless nothingness? No. Remember what I explained earlier about if you woke up with all your memories gone, how there would have been a continuous stream of experience, but the new you wouldn't remember the old you? And how the old you didn't go into a black void of silent nothingness, etc. The only experience there'd be is the one being done by this one and only brain. It'd be the experience, just as when the only brain that existed in this empty universe was you, and that was the consciousness, the experience. So even if the brain that was doing you never came to exist, because this other brain was born instead, there'd still be an I experience. There'd still be consciousness. But it'd just be a different I experience, or a different self. In this thought experiment, no matter which brain was born, there is still self-experience. There is subjective experience. But there is no one in peaceful oblivion, nothingness. There isn't anyone being spared or deprived from this one and only experience because no such non-existent people or animals exist. In this universe, there is only experience. So after death, we shouldn't conclude that death will be followed by nothingness or a black void, but instead, if you really will cease to exist, then that end will be followed by consciousness that's being done by some other brain, one of the living brains that are doing consciousness, one that is doing consciousness. In the very same way that your lack of existence was followed by consciousness due to the birth of a brain. So you sort of have to see yourself, remove your ego from the equation and just see that a brain was born and it started doing consciousness. You have to see yourself objectively as just another brain. You know, a brain is born and bam, there's consciousness comes to be. Or you could just imagine that, you know, you wake up and you don't have a name or anything. You know, your earliest memories when you were a child, there was just consciousness, just the onset of consciousness, and you didn't know your name or anything like that. Your very first memories when you were, you know, you didn't even understand language or anything. You were just seeing things and stuff. You know, you were just a brain doing consciousness. Anyways, I'll get back to reading this. In the very same way that your lack of existence was followed by a consciousness due to the birth of a brain. So your death, just like before birth was, will also be followed by yet another individual consciousness. That consciousness could be any of the consciousness that's being done by any brain that exists in the universe. And so, if you were never born, then instead of a perpetual state of deprivation because other brains were doing consciousness back then, there'd still be conscious experience via one of those existing brains here on Earth or perhaps elsewhere in the universe. So, if it isn't one life, it's another. I was thinking about that the other day. If it isn't one life, it's another. I like that phrase. Kind of like how people say, if it isn't one thing, it's another. Or people say, it's always something, whenever they get frustrated and stuff. If it isn't one thing, it's another. So I say, if it isn't one life, it's another. There's simply no escaping experience because, as Tom Clark puts it, consciousness is always present for itself. And as I put it, only experience is what's experienced. Of course, what I've just explained doesn't invalidate all types of antinatalism. If one is against procreation for other reasons, instead of the purpose of avoiding experience altogether, then those reasons might be valid. But David Benatar's antinatalism, which is based on what he calls the asymmetry argument, is nonsensical, as I've pointed out, because he desires there to be no experience, just like he desires there to be just perpetual deprivation of anything. So, which I just pointed out above is not a possibility. He desires an experience of no experience. Um, Here, I am not saying that people should have kids or that life is great, etc. Although there is one scenario where it would actually be a good thing to have kids. But we can discuss that sometime if you'd like. Thank you for reading all of this, much appreciated. So, what I just said there at the end, one scenario where it would actually be a good thing, I explained that in my video, which was a response to Amendum, I believe his name is. I think his name is Gary. He is the person that came up with the term ephilism, life spelled backwards and ism at the end of it, ephilism. I did explain at the very end of that video, like the last couple minutes, and it gets cut off at the very end. But I said what was necessary. I explained the one and only scenario where it would be a good thing to have kids, and that is if there are two places in the universe that have life, and they're the only two places. And one of those places is full of people and animals, whatever, and I call it the hellish arena, and all those people and animals there are suffering horribly. Just life is just unbearable there. It's horrible. And then there's the other place that is good. It's relatively good. It might be great for some people, but it's much, much better than the other place, which I call the hellish arena. And so what would be best is for people to have kids in the good place. And so each time somebody dies in the hellish arena, there is a chance that one of those good life experiences, consciousnesses, would come after their death rather than one of the consciousnesses that is stuck in the hellish arena. And so eventually the best thing that could happen is to figure out a way to stop births altogether in the hellish arena, um, or just let them all die off, and you know, and then the realization of generic subjective continuity would be very important, for as kind of a tool in our lives actually to for such scenarios, like considering. Anyways, uh, yeah. So if you're interested in this, I made many videos on this, and it's a topic I like to explore. Um, just because not there's barely anyone talking about this. Um, so yeah, I suggest reading Tom Clark's essay, and Sam Harris, a popular atheist. He actually did a podcast episode which is titled "The Paradox of Death." He did that on this. Um, so yeah, that's everything. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your video, and I have subscribed to your channel. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully you respond to this or react to it somehow or reply. All right, thanks again.